You're watching Northern Crimes.
Oregon is a state known for its landscapes, dense forests, cascading rivers, and scenic coastlines. It's a place where nature is bountiful, offering freedom and adventure to those who seek it. But beneath this idyllic surface lies a much darker side. Like many places, Oregon harbors its share of disturbing secrets and unsolved mysteries, cases that haunt communities and leave families desperate for answers. In the shadows of these vast forests and Cascadian mountains, sinister crimes have occurred that remain unsolved, and victims have disappeared without a trace. This is the true story of 5 unsolved cold cases from Oregon, and this is Northern Crimes. In the late spring of 1969, a University of Oregon student named Janet Lynn Shanahan disappeared after attending her younger brother's birthday party. Just 2 days later, her lifeless body was discovered in the trunk of her car. The case sent shockwaves through the Eugene community and has haunted investigators for over 5 decades. Who could have committed such a horrific crime? Despite renewed efforts, the mystery remains unsolved. Janet Lynn Shanahan was a 22-year-old student with a bright future ahead of her. An honor student at the University of Oregon, she was studying to become a teacher and was known for her kind and gregarious nature. Janet had recently celebrated her 10-month anniversary with her husband, Christopher, and was a beloved member of her family. She graduated from Willamette High School and had maintained close ties to her community. Everyone who knew her described her as a shining light, full of life and promise. On April 21st, 1969, Janet attended her 15-year-old brother's birthday party at her family's home on Rutledge Street in West Eugene. After the celebration, Janet was last seen leaving with her sister to run a few errands, picking up food and a magazine for her husband, but she never made it back to their apartment. When her husband, Christopher Shanahan, realized she hadn't returned, he reported her missing the next day. On April 23rd, just 2 days after she vanished, Christopher and Janet's sister went searching for her car. Within minutes, they found the 1951 Plymouth sedan parked in a ditch on Cross Street, an industrial area in West Eugene. Inside the trunk, they made the grim discovery: Janet had been strangled to death. The investigation into Janet's murder has spanned more than half a century, with 4 generations of investigators working tirelessly to find the killer. From the beginning, the case presented challenges. Key evidence, such as DNA, it wasn't collected or preserved due to the limitations of forensic technology at the time. Despite this, police re-interviewed witnesses and combed through old leads, and the cold case team believes that Janet's killer was someone who knew her. Additionally, investigators followed up on sightings of Janet at the Linwood Cafe, located off Highway 99, but those leads ultimately went cold. Without hard evidence or a clear suspect, the case grew increasingly difficult to solve. The cold case team hopes that someone, perhaps a friend or acquaintance of the killer, might come forward after all these years. Today, more than 50 years after her death, Janet Shanahan's murder remains unsolved. Her family hasn't given up hope, offering a $45,000 reward for information leading to the arrest and conviction of Janet's killer. For Janet's loved ones, time is running out, and they fear that those with vital information may soon be lost to age. With no DNA evidence to rely on, investigators are appealing to anyone who may have known the killer or heard something over the years. They hope that a long-held secret might eventually come to light, offering closure to a family that has lived with grief for far too long. In the late morning of February 23, 1978, Benita Chamberlin left Sacred Heart Hospital in Eugene, Oregon, with plans to return just a few hours later to bring her premature newborn daughter home. She was excited about this long-awaited moment, but she never made it back. What should have been a day filled with joy turned into a haunting mystery. Benita vanished, leaving behind only a few scattered clues, and for over 4 decades, her family has been searching for answers. Benita was a 24-year-old mother of 3, deeply devoted to her children. Her 2 older daughters, aged 7 and 1.5, lived with her estranged husband, John, as the couple was in the process of getting a divorce. Benita had recently given birth to their 3rd child, a baby girl named Michelle, who was born 5 weeks premature. Known for her strong work ethic, Benita had been employed as a maid at the Holiday Inn on Coburg Road until she went on maternity leave. Her friends and coworkers described her as kind, responsible, and caring, always willing to take on extra work. Benita's dedication as a mother and her excitement about taking her newborn home made her sudden disappearance all the more puzzling and heartbreaking. On the morning of February 23rd, Benita went to Sacred Heart Hospital to nurse her newborn and prepare to bring her home. At 10 a.m., she called a friend to share her excitement. Benita was last seen leaving the hospital with her estranged husband, John Chamberlain, around the same time. The plan was for her to return by 1:30 p.m. to take Michelle home, but she never made it back. Her mother reported her missing in the early hours of February 24th. Later, that same night, around 2:30 a.m., her purse was found in a University of Oregon parking lot just a mile from the hospital. A few hours later, her car, a blue 1966 Mercury Comet, was discovered abandoned in a parking lot of a nearby Coca-Cola bottling plant, just a block from where the purse had been located. The investigation into Benita's disappearance was clouded by troubling coincidences and scant evidence. Shortly after she was reported missing, a human thigh bone was discovered in a nearby trash bin. For a brief period, authorities considered the possibility that the bone could have belonged to Benita, but later testing determined that it was part of an unrelated case involving another missing woman, Pamela Bruno. While authorities scoured the area, including searching garbage trucks for additional clues, nothing of substance was uncovered. Benita's estranged husband, John, was with her on the day she disappeared, leading to speculation about his involvement, but no evidence ever surfaced to implicate him directly. To this day, no suspects have been officially named, and investigators have few leads to go on. More than 40 years have passed since Benita Chamberlin's disappearance, and her case remains unsolved. Her family and community continue to search for answers, clinging to hope despite the passage of time. Benita's newborn daughter, Michelle, grew up without ever knowing her mother, and her older daughters were left to grapple with the mystery of what happened to her. Though her fate remains unknown, Benita's family still believes that someone out there holds the key to solving this cold case. On the morning of June 5th, 2004, 20-year-old Domingo Ramirez left his home in Cave Junction, Oregon, for what was supposed to be a peaceful day trip to Kelly Lake, a secluded spot near the California border. With him was his beloved dog Candy, a 3-year-old pit bull. But something went terribly wrong that day. Domingo never returned home, and his disappearance has left his family and investigators with a multitude of questions. What happened to this young man on a simple outdoor excursion? Despite a promising life ahead of him, Domingo vanished without a trace. Domingo Ramirez was a bright, compassionate young man who grew up in Josephine County, Oregon. He was known for his cheerful personality and his love for the outdoors. At the time of his disappearance, Domingo's girlfriend was pregnant with their first child, a son he would never get to meet. He adored his dog, Candy, who was always by his side. Domingo's mother described him as a loving and responsible son, always devoted to his family and excited about becoming a father. His sudden disappearance left a lasting scar on those who knew him, and his family continues to search for the truth. On June 5, 2004, Domingo set off for Kelly Lake, located in the Siskiyou Wilderness just across the California border. But this day trip quickly turned into a nightmare when he never returned home. 8 days later, on June 13th, his dog, Candy, was found near Page Mountain Snow Park, just a few miles from his intended destination. She'd been shot twice in the head, but miraculously survived. Candy's discovery raised immediate alarms, but Domingo was nowhere to be found. His 1997 Oldsmobile Bravada SUV also vanished. But then, just a few weeks later in July, the vehicle was discovered in Klamath Falls, Oregon, over 100 miles from where he disappeared. The man driving the vehicle, Juan Miguel Ramon Soto, was arrested, but Domingo was still missing. The investigation into Domingo's disappearance has been fraught with confusion and heartache. His beloved dog was found injured but alive, raising the chilling possibility that Domingo met with foul play. Authorities identified two persons of interest in the case, Jose Luis Villegas Cavada and Joel Brian Rico Orozco. Both men were in the Happy Camp area around the time of Ramirez's disappearance and were seen driving a white Chevrolet Monte Carlo with Oregon plates. Investigators have not yet been able to locate them for questioning. Further complicating the case, some of Domingo's personal items were found on a Native American reservation in Northern California, but no other concrete evidence has emerged. In 2006, investigators reported that they'd found evidence in a foreign country related to the case, but it led to no major breakthroughs. To this day, the disappearance of Domingo Ramirez remains unsolved. His family has never given up hope, offering a $10,000 reward for information that leads to his return. While investigators believe that Domingo was likely kidnapped and murdered, his body has never been found, and no arrests have been made in connection with the case. Domingo's disappearance is one of many cold cases in Josephine County, but his family remains determined to find the truth, hoping that one day justice will be served. On April 30th, 2007, 26-year-old Rebekah Bramel left her mother's home in Portland, Oregon. It would be the last time anyone saw her. In the days that followed, Rebekah's borrowed vehicle was found abandoned deep in the wilderness of Lane County, with a flat tire and her personal belongings scattered across the dashboard. Rebekah, however, was nowhere to be found. For almost 20 years, her family has lived with unanswered questions about what really happened to her. Did she disappear by choice? Or did a sinister event occur in the Oregon forest? Growing up in Portland, Oregon, Rebekah Bramel was a nature lover with a deep passion for gardening. Born on January 9, 1981, she grew up in a large family with 4 siblings. She was a gifted horticulturist and enjoyed outdoor activities such as mountain biking. Her artistic interests included painting and making jewelry. Friends and family remember her as creative, a kind soul who adored her nieces and nephews. But despite her love of nature and life, Rebekah had been struggling with what her family believes was undiagnosed bipolar disorder. Her mental health had deteriorated in the months leading up to her disappearance. In the weeks before her disappearance, Rebekah's behavior became increasingly erratic. She began drinking heavily, staying up late, and running up credit card debt. By April 30th, 2007, she was in a fragile state. That night, she visited her mother's house before leaving when her mother urged her to get some rest. This was the last confirmed sighting of Rebekah. In early May, her borrowed vehicle was discovered abandoned on a remote logging road between Deerhorn and Good Pasture Roads, east of Springfield, Oregon. The vehicle had a flat tire and its gas tank was empty. Inside the car, the contents of her wallet were carefully laid out on the dashboard, including a cherished cigarette case. There was no sign of Rebekah, and the vehicle sat in a tow lot for a month before the authorities were notified, delaying any potential search efforts. Investigators believe that Rebekah may have traveled into the forested area close to where her car was found. Her boyfriend speculated that she may have deliberately chosen to end her life, wandering into the wilderness to hide herself. Rebekah had no known ties to the remote area where the car was found, although she'd visited the location before with her boyfriend. Due to the month-long delay between the car's discovery and the beginning of the search, authorities missed critical time to conduct a proper investigation. Despite multiple searches, no trace of Rebekah has been found, and the case remains cold. More than 17 years after her disappearance, Rebekah's case remains unsolved. Her family believes that her untreated mental illness may have played a role in her disappearance. Others suspect she may have wandered deep into the wilderness to die. While authorities have searched the area, no remains have been recovered. Rebekah's loved ones continue to hope for answers, hoping that someday the mystery of what happened to her will finally be solved. On the night of September 4th, 2008, a fire tore through a remote cabin nestled in the mountains east of Ashland, Oregon. Inside, 46-year-old David Lewis, a beloved father of 3 and a well-known member of his tight-knit community, was found dead. But this wasn't just a tragic accident. David had been killed, shot before his cabin was deliberately set on fire. To this day, his killer remains at large, and the mystery of who took David's life haunts his family and investigators. David Lewis was a hardworking man, respected by friends, neighbors, and family in the mountain community where he lived. Born on December 23, 1961 in Wilmington, Delaware, David had spent over 20 years on the summit of Dead Indian Memorial Road in Jackson County, Oregon. A true jack of all trades, he was known for his generous spirit, love of the outdoors, and deep devotion to his 3 sons. He spent his free time fishing in the nearby lakes and fixing up his rural cabin. His friends and family remember him as a man who lived simply but with integrity. Tragically, it may have been David's knowledge of secrets in his community that cost him his life. On the night of September 3rd, or perhaps early September 4th, 2008, David was murdered inside his cabin on Dead Indian Memorial Road. His body was found after a fire consumed the home, which was later determined to be an act of arson. First responders arrived at the scene around 3:10 a.m. to find the structure completely engulfed in flames. Disturbingly, they could smell the distinct odor of a body burning. It took 8 long months for authorities to identify David's remains using DNA, as his body had been severely burned. In a strange twist, another fire was reported just miles away at a vacant vacation cabin on the same night. Investigators believe the two fires were connected, but despite countless interviews and leads, no arrests have been made. The investigation into David's murder has been a long and difficult process. Jackson County Sheriff's Office detectives have conducted hundreds of interviews, but the case has yielded few solid leads. The bullet that killed David was similar to the one used in a different murder in Central Point that same day, but forensic testing ruled out any direct connection. Investigators have faced frustration, as it's believed that multiple people may know what happened to David, but fear or loyalty has kept them from coming forward. 16 years have passed since David Lewis was murdered, and his case remains unsolved. A $20,000 reward is being offered for any information that leads to an arrest and conviction. David's loved ones hold on to hope, believing that someone out there knows the truth. Jackson County investigators continue to work the case, but they need someone to come forward and provide the missing piece of the puzzle. As we've looked into these 5 unsolved cold cases, each one leaves us with more questions than answers. Families are left searching, investigators chase leads, and communities are haunted by the mysteries that remain unsolved. Oregon, with all its natural beauty, it harbors dark secrets, hidden deep within its forests, its rivers, and its quiet streets. These stories are not just tales of the past, but ongoing mysteries that refuse to fade into obscurity. Will justice ever be served, or will these cases remain unsolved, forever leaving us wondering what really happened in the dark corners of the Pacific Northwest?